What do you do when the world stops cheering? When the cameras turn off, the money runs out, and the name they once praised now lives in whispers? Do you hide, do you run, or do you stand? With nothing left and choose to fight for something real? This isn't just the story of a man who lost everything. This is the story of what he found when there was nothing left to lose. Because sometimes, the real comeback doesn't start on a stage. It starts in silence. There was a time when Todd Chrisley wasn't just a man. He was a brand, a lifestyle, a dream that people turned on their TVs to escape into. Every smile he wore felt effortless. Every comeback line he dropped on camera felt sharp, witty, like it was written by Hollywood, but it wasn't. That was just Todd being Todd. He didn't need a script. He was the script. From the outside, his life looked flawless, stunning. Mansion with golden chandeliers that sparkled like his charm, luxury cars that slid across the driveway like a scene from a movie, and a family that laughed, loved, and lived loud, right in front of millions of people every single week. America fell in love with him. He was bold, proud, unapologetically Southern. He walked through life like it was a stage, and the world watched from the front row. To his fans, Todd Chrisley wasn't just successful, he was untouchable. A self-made millionaire who built an empire with his bare hands and a voice sharp enough to silence any room. He had charisma you couldn't teach, confidence you couldn't fake, and a lifestyle people only dreamed of. His life was wrapped in designer suits and million-dollar smiles, and most people believed the fairy tale. Because let's be honest, he made it look so easy. Here's the truth no one ever saw. Sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. And while the world watched his highlight reel, few ever wondered what it cost to keep that perfect image alive. At the top of the mountain, it's easy to believe you're unshakable, that the applause will never fade, that the cameras will never stop rolling. But what happens when the lights finally go out? It's easy to admire a man standing in the spotlight. The world claps, the cameras flash, houses grow bigger. The car's sleeker, the bank account heavier, but what nobody talks about is the pressure that builds in silence. Behind the smiles, behind the production lights, behind the image he built so perfectly, layer by layer, year by year. For Todd Chrisley, the pressure wasn't just about being rich. It was about staying rich. It was about holding up a lifestyle millions of people envied and never letting them see a single crack. When you're the face of your family, your business, your brand, you're not allowed to stumble. You're not allowed to pause. Because the moment you do, the world stops cheering and starts whispering. Todd didn't come from royalty. He wasn't handed a silver spoon. Everything he had, every dollar, every deal, every bit of status he built, brick by brick, day by day. And when you've climbed that high on your own, the fear of falling hits different. There were interviews to give, episodes to shoot, appearances to keep up, a public image to maintain not just for him but for his family. Because people weren't just watching Todd Chrisley the man, they were watching Todd Chrisley the show. And when the cameras are always rolling, when millions of people are watching your every move, you begin to live life for the lens instead of for yourself. The clothes had to stay expensive. The words had to stay polished. The family had to stay perfect even when real life was anything but. And that pressure, that heavy, suffocating weight of perfection, it doesn't come crashing down all at once. It comes quietly, like a slow leak in a perfect tire. You don't notice until the ride gets bumpier. And by then, it's already too late. He smiled for the world. But who was smiling for him? He carried the weight of a million eyes, a family's expectations, and a brand built on always looking. Like he had it all together. But behind closed doors, when the lights went off and the laughter faded, there were moments no one saw. Sleepless nights, quiet worry, silent fear that maybe, just maybe, the life he'd built was getting too big to hold. Because the truth is, it's one thing to rise, but it's something else entirely to carry the weight of staying there. And Todd, he carried it all until it started carrying him. One day, the world was cheering him on. And then just like that, it wasn't. There's no sound quite like the silence that follows a fall. No warning, no countdown, just everything you thought was solid suddenly slipping out from under you. It didn't happen in slow motion. It didn't unfold like a carefully written scene in one of his shows. It came like a storm, fast, loud, uninvited. And in the blink of an eye, the man who once had it all was facing a world that didn't look or feel the same anymore. Deals vanished. Cameras stopped rolling. Voices that once called daily went quiet. And the homes that once echoed with laughter and light suddenly felt hollow, like empty stages waiting for a show that might never return. But here's the part people often miss. When your world collapses, it's not just your money or your fame that disappears. It's your identity. It's everything you told yourself you were. Because when you've built your worth on success, what's left? When that success is gone, Todd wasn't just losing the life he had, he was losing the version of himself he thought was permanent. For the first time in years, there were no cameras. No scripts. No perfectly staged moments. Just silence. And in that silence, a question rose louder than anything the world had ever shouted. Who am I now? You see, life has a cruel way of revealing who we are, not in our victories, but in our valleys. It's easy to hold your head high when you're being applauded. It's another thing entirely to stand up when no one's clapping. When the phone stops ringing, when even your own reflection feels like a stranger. But here's where the SCTA real story begins. Because sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters. And sometimes it's in our lowest moments that the seeds of transformation are planted. Todd Chrisley had been the star of a show watched by millions, but now the cameras were off. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't performing. He was just trying to breathe. No applause, no edits, no spotlight, just a man, learning how to be human again. When the lights go out, you hear everything differently. The world that once cheered your name becomes eerily quiet. The rooms that once echoed with laughter now hum with stillness. And all the noise, the interviews, the headlines, the praise, it disappears like smoke in the wind. That's the part no one prepares you for. Not the headlines, not the loss, but the silence. Because silence isn't just empty. Silence confronts you. It sits beside you when everyone else leaves. It stares at you when you look in the mirror. It asks questions no fame ever taught you how to answer. Who are you when you're no longer being watched? What's left of you? When the image fades. Todd had spent years performing, not just for TV, but for life itself. He'd been the strong one, the smart one, the sharp, clever, untouchable man. But now he was just Todd. No script, no spotlight, no applause, and the quiet was louder than anything he'd ever faced. He woke up in a world that didn't ask for his charm, his jokes, or his style. No more cameras following his every step. No more producers scheduling his every hour. No more audience to impress. For the first time in a very long time, he had to sit with himself. He's just a man. No armor, no image, no fame to hide behind. And that's where the real battle began. Because when the world turns away, you start to see the truth. Some of the hardest work we'll ever do isn't in building our careers. It's in rebuilding ourselves. The spotlight may make you famous, but the silence? That's where you discover who you really are. And Todd, he was about to find out that real strength. This doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being honest. Even if it's just with yourself, it wasn't the money that haunted him. It wasn't the headlines, the noise, or even the silence that came after. It was the thought of who he might become if he gave up now. Because deep beneath the surface, beneath the loss, the regret, the long nights of questioning everything, there was something that refused to die. A father's heart. And Todd Chrisley, above everything else, was a father first. Before the shows, before the image, before the fame. His children had seen him in glory. They'd seen the cars, the cameras, the world hanging on his every word. But now they were seeing him in something far more important. They were seeing him real, No filters. No edits. No rehearsed punchlines. Just a man broken, yes, but awake. And somewhere in that quiet, he made a promise, not out loud. Not on paper, not for the cameras. A private, sacred promise whispered only in the chambers of his own heart. Will not let this be the end of me. Not for them, not for me. Because failure doesn't define a father. Falling doesn't erase the love he's built. Being broken doesn't mean he has to stay that way. He thought about the moments that mattered, reading stories at bedtime. Proud smiles from the sidelines. So quiet hugs when words weren't enough. He thought about the people who still believed in him, even if they didn't say it out loud. And in that stillness, something stronger than shame began to rise. Responsibility, redemption, a reason. He didn't have all the answers. He wasn't sure what came next. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He had to rebuild. Not his brand, not his reputation, but himself. Because one day, his children would ask questions. They'd want to know what happened and how he responded. And when that day came, he wanted to look them in the eye and say, I fell, but I rose, and I kept rising. For you, there's a breaking point in every man's life. A moment when pride no longer protects you and the mask falls off and you're forced to meet yourself in raw, honest silence. For Todd, that moment didn't come with cameras or headlines. It didn't come in a courtroom or a boardroom. It came alone, quiet, like a whisper in a room that had grown too heavy with regret. He doesn't talk much about what exactly happened that night, but it wasn't a dramatic scene. It was simple. He was sitting in a small, unfamiliar room. No suits, no spotlight, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the pounding of a heart that didn't know how to stay strong anymore. And in that stillness, something inside him shattered. Not his spirit, no. Something smaller, something heavier. His need to be perfect, his addiction to appearances, the pressure to always have it together, to always win, to never let anyone see him bleed. He let it all go. For the first time in what felt like years, cried. Not the kind of tears you wipe away before someone sees. It's the kind you let fall, because they don't need permission anymore. That moment broke him, but not in the way the world thinks. It broke his walls. It broke his resistance. It broke the image he'd been performing for far too long, and in its place, something more honest began to rise. Not the old Todd, the polished, perfectly worded man with a smile for every scene, but a new version. One that was quieter, softer, wiser. It's strange how we spend our lives running from weakness. It's the only doorway. To strength, Todd didn't need a comeback story. He needed a rebirth. At that night, that quiet, shattering night, he met the version of himself that didn't need applause to feel worthy. He met the father who could love without needing to impress. He met the man who could finally admit, I was wrong, but I'm not done. And that's where it all began. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand announcement, no stage, no dramatic music playing in the background, just a man. Waking up one morning and deciding, I have to try again, not for fame, not for approval, but because something inside him whispered, you're still here, so live like it. And so, Todd Chrisley began to step back into the world. Not the world he once ruled, not the red carpets, not the cameras, not the flash and flare of reality TV. This world was quieter, gentler, realer. It looked like early mornings instead of late-night premieres. Phone calls to family instead of press interviews. Washing away the noise and learning to hear his own voice again, without the echo of expectation. It started small, single walk around the block. A journal open on a kitchen table, deep. Breath before making a phone call he'd avoided for far too long. There were no headlines now, no updates on celebrity blogs. Because the truth is, the real comeback stories don't happen in public. They happen in private, in the space between who you were and who you're trying to become. He didn't try to reclaim his old life. He didn't chase after the spotlight or beg to be seen. Instead, he focused on something bigger. being present. Present with his children. Present with his thoughts. Bro. Present with the pain and the possibility of starting from zero. He listened more. He rushed less. He learned to say things like, "I'm sorry," and mean it, without explaining it away. And slowly, life began to move again. Not fast, not loud, but forward. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg for attention, it just begins. One quiet step at a time. And Todd, he was walking again. Not as the man the world once adored, but as the man he was learning to love. For the first time. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself, doesn't show up with confetti or fireworks or a sudden moment of triumph. Sometimes it looks like a simple message. A few quiet words. Posted not for likes, but for love. And one day, after all the noise had faded, after the lights had long since gone out, Todd Chrisley wrote something the world hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't about wealth, or fashion, or fame. It was about his son, a proud message, a father's heart, laid bare for the world to see. He celebrated his son's achievement, not with flair, not with ego, but with honor. That one message didn't try to rebuild an image. It didn't chase headlines. It wasn't a performance. It was something far more powerful. It was a bridge back to his family. It's back to what truly matters. Back to the people he almost lost while chasing everything else. And for the people watching, the ones who had followed his highs, his lows, his unraveling, it meant something. Because in that small, unshakably human post, they didn't see the TV star. They didn't see the businessman. They didn't see the man who once stood in front of cameras and controlled every frame. They saw a father, man, trying again, loving again, showing up again. And maybe that's all we ever really need. Not a grand redemption arc. Not a perfect comeback. Just someone willing to say, "I'm still here, and I still love you." Sometimes all it takes is one message. Say everything that years of silence never could. He used to walk with cameras chasing every step, crew behind him, a mic on his collar. Every word, every move, captured, edited, shared. Now, there were no crews. No scripts. Just footsteps echoing on a quiet morning street. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking to be seen. He was walking to feel again. To feel the rhythm of life outside the spotlight. To feel the weight of the breeze, the sting of past mistakes, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, it's not too late. Because when you've spent years performing, you forget how to just be. Be still, be ordinary, be present. Todd had built a life on being extraordinary. But now, he was learning the power of being real. No designer suits, no camera-ready smiles, just coffee in a chipped mug. Then mornings that didn't start with a call time. This is what healing looks like. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with music or montages. It looks like phone calls that begin with, "Can we talk?" It sounds like quiet prayers whispered before sleep. It feels like starting over, even when the world only remembers who you used to be. And that's the part nobody sees. Mornings filled with doubt. The moments where you almost give up. The inner war between shame and growth, fear and courage, regret and hope. But here's the truth. You don't need a stage to rise. You don't need millions watching to matter. Sometimes the most powerful kind of strength is the one that shows up when no one is clapping. It's a kind that whispers, "Just take the next step." So Todd walked. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Not as the man he used to be, but as the man he was finally becoming. And in doing so, he gave permission to everyone watching to start walking too. Not toward fame, not toward perfection, but toward peace. Comebacks. The world loves them. They make great headlines. Great stories, great entertainment, but this one, it wasn't about climbing back to where he once was. It was about rising into something new. Because Todd Chrisley wasn't trying to be the man he used to be. He was trying to be the man he had never given himself permission to become. This comeback didn't involve flashing lights or grand returns to television. It didn't involve reclaiming stages or chasing applause. It involved quiet mornings, humble choices, a deeper understanding of what truly matters. Fame teaches you how to impress. Failure teaches you how to be real. Somewhere along this journey, Todd stopped trying to look strong, started focusing on being strong. Not strong in the way the world claps for, but strong in the way a father shows up for his kids. Strong in the way a man owns his past without letting it define his future. Strong in the way someone keeps walking, even when no one's watching. This comeback wasn't for cameras. It was for character, for peace, for redemption. Because there's a difference between returning to the spotlight and returning to yourself. And this time, Todd wasn't chasing relevance. He was chasing truth. He was chasing the version of himself that didn't need the world's approval, because he had finally earned his own. And maybe that's what real comebacks look like. Not rising to impress people, but rising because you finally understand. You're worth it, even when the world forgets you. For most of his life, Todd Chrisley thought legacy meant one thing: success. He thought it meant leaving behind real estate empires, million-dollar homes, TV reruns that would outlive his name. He thought legacy was built with headlines and sealed with applause. Yet after losing it all, after falling so hard that even his own reflection became hard to face, he discovered something far more powerful. Legacy isn't what you build. It's what you leave behind in the hearts of others. It's not the show you star in. It's how your children remember you when the cameras are off. It's the conversations that heal, the apologies that mean something, the courage to grow even when you've already failed. He used to think legacy was about being admired. Now he knows it's about being understood, forgiven, loved. Todd doesn't talk about reclaiming his empire. He talks about earning back trust, slowly, humbly, one conversation at a time. He's not focused on what the world thinks of him anymore. He's focused on what his family feels when they sit across the table from him. He wants his children to see more than the man they once watched on TV. He wants them to see the man who learned how to change, who broke and rebuilt, who stopped performing, and finally showed up. He wants to be remembered not for the life he once lived in front of millions, but for the life he's living now, in front of the people who matter most. Because legacy isn't about what you leave behind on paper. It's about what you leave behind in people. And now every step he takes, every honest word, every small act of love, isn't about polishing a name. It's about passing down a truth that no matter how far you fall, you are never too far gone. Not to be forgiven, not to grow, not to begin again. Maybe you've never been on television. Maybe you've never had millions watching your every move. But maybe you have felt the pressure to look perfect. Maybe you've known what it's like to fall and wonder if you'll ever rise again. Todd Chrisley's story isn't just about a man on TV. It's about all of us. About the parts of ourselves we try to hide, the mistakes we carry in silence, the shame we cover with smiles. It's a reminder that no matter how far you've fallen, you're not finished. Your story doesn't end in the silence. It begins there. Because the truth is, rock bottom isn't a death sentence. Sometimes it's a doorway. A chance to pause, to feel, to ask the question, who do I want to be now? We live in a world obsessed with highlight reels. But healing doesn't happen in front of an audience. It happens in the quiet, the spaces where no one's watching. In the honest conversations, the long walks, the brave decision to try again, Todd didn't rise because he was flawless. He rose because he refused to stay broken. And maybe that's what you needed to hear today, that it's okay to hurt. It's okay to stumble. It's okay to not have it all figured out. But what's not okay is to believe that your mistakes make you unworthy of redemption, because they don't. You can still build something beautiful. You can still love deeply, forgive freely, and live fully. Not because of what the world thinks you are, but because of what you know you're becoming. So if you're watching this today and you feel like your story is over, let this remind you, it's not. You're not finished. You're not forgotten. You're just getting started. And like Todd, maybe the best version of you, the realest, strongest, most honest version, is the one that rises after everything fell apart. Thank you for watching. If this touched your heart, leave a comment below. You never know who you'll inspire, just by sharing a little piece of your own story.